What's up, Taiwan? I'm Eric Gao, bringing you the news this Sunday afternoon. Demonstrators are marching in central Taipei to call for improvements to road safety. Marchers set off from Taiwan's legislature, and they're calling for reform to the driver licensing system and for a process to remove unfit drivers from the roads. The rally comes in the wake of a high-profile crash in New Taipei last week that killed 3 people and injured 12. Sunday's march was organized by civic groups and supported by small political parties.
我们今天主要是对交通部有提出我们的3大诉求，包含我们要求驾驶人要有全面的回训，以及我们要改革这个高龄的换照制，然后最后是我们也希望地方政府可以针对交通工程来做改善。
The protest organizers also held a memorial near the site of the New Taipei crash. About 30 high school students gathered outside the Education Ministry to protest draft guidelines that could see mobile phones banned during school hours.
这个权益是直接切身到我自己，因为我自己平常就手机真的是，不管是游戏还是说我平常在跑学校的公务，我都是用手机去跟学校老师沟通联络的。
The draft rules announced last week would require elementary and junior high schools to hold all students' devices during the school day. Senior high schools would get to set their own rules after discussions among teachers, parents, and students. But some high school students fear that their voices will not be heard due to limited representation in council meetings.
最广大的校务会议当中，其实学生代表只占8%，也就是可能有400多位到500多位的老师，而仅仅只有22位的学生能够参与到校务会议当中。
The ministry plans to convene a nationwide student forum on June 1st to gather feedback on these draft guidelines. The head of the Pingtung government is speaking out against a planned referendum to reactivate the country's 3rd nuclear power plant located in her southern county. The last reactor there had just been decommissioned earlier this month.
请尊重屏东人长期已经40年在核三的影响威胁之下，已经除役了，还要再走回头路吗？
That plant was shut down as part of the ruling DPP's nuclear-free homeland policy. But the opposition KMT and TPP have pushed for a public vote this August to restart the plant. The head of the TPP says people can cast their ballots then, adding that he believes many Pingtung residents support the move. The fight over referendum proposals is just one of several clashes between the legislature and the executive held by different sides of the political aisle. For more on the current split going on in the government, Alec McDonald spoke to Karis Templeman on our interview show Zoom In, Zoom Out.
Because of the reforms that Taiwan has gone under since democratization, I want to talk a little bit about the split between the executive yuan and the legislative yuan, and some of the more structural reasons that have given rise to this very partisan politicking right now.
The fundamental nature of Taiwan's constitutional framework now is it's basically a presidential regime. And that means there's separation of powers. That means that the executive and the legislative are elected by different constituencies, and they have what we call in political science separate survival. So they don't rely on the other side for confidence. And as a consequence of that, they both, I think, validly can claim a mandate from the voters to do what they see is the right thing to do for Taiwan. So Lai Ching-te can say, I beat both the TPP and the KMT candidate in the last election. Therefore, I have a mandate to lead the country. The voters chose me, not the other two parties. But the KMT and TPP can say the voters delivered us collectively a majority in the legislature. We have a mandate from the voters to do what we think is right for the country. So there's a kind of inherent tension to this constitutional system when you get a party winning the executive but not controlling a majority in the legislature. So if we get deeper into the problem here, typically for Taiwan, over at least for the last 16 years in Taiwan, the same party has controlled both branches. It's only when you've got divided government situation that you really see this kind of inherently adversarial relationship between the two branches emerge again. And then that puts a lot of pressure on the other parts of Taiwan's political system to adjudicate disputes between the two branches, in particular the Constitutional Court. And so the Constitutional Court has then become a political football in the partisan fight between the two other branches.
do you think that this division will continue, or might there be a way found back to more normalcy in the current political environment?
I think the hope for all of us should be that there are some new norms that develop about what are kind of the appropriate limits to confrontation of the other branch. Let me sound a positive note here. When we look at the previous period of divided government in Taiwan, that was an unprecedented situation for everybody during the early Chen Shui-bian era. And in fact, there was some institutional innovation that occurred during that time. Both the major parties, both the DPP and KMT, agreed to significant constitutional reforms. In an ideal world, we'd see the two sides recognize that this current system has some significant flaws, especially when there's divided government.
So this is a good pivot point to go actually back to last May with the first investigative powers bill. Now, this was a bill that the KMT and TPP pushed forward through the Legislative Yuan, and eventually it was struck down as unconstitutional by the Constitutional Court. Can you go into a little bit about how that bill last May eventually leads into this constitutional crisis Taiwan is facing right now?
The legislature in Taiwan has always been at a disadvantage relative to the executive branch. They can call ministers to the legislature and put them on the stand and question them in public, but they don't have the ability to sanction ministers for saying things that aren't true. They don't have the ability either to subpoena other members of the government and force them to come before the legislature and testify under oath. And they don't have the power to acquire documents. And so there's actually a kind of a fundamental problem in the Taiwan system where the executive branch has much more power and information than the legislative branch. And so I think there's a valid concern by the majority in the legislature now that they want to strengthen legislative oversight powers. And this bill that passed in May was an attempt to do that. The problem is they passed it with just a KMT majority, and there wasn't much attempt to either negotiate with the DPP caucus or the executive branch itself. And they were a bit too ambitious. They pushed the limits of what was constitutionally allowed in this bill and opened themselves up then to a constitutional court challenge. My reading of the law, actually, and certainly the Constitutional Court, who's the real experts on this, agreed that big parts of that were sloppily written, or they were written in a way that violated some fundamental principles of the system. And so I think if you had a better crafted law, we'd be in a much better place right now.
You can find the full episode of Zoom In, Zoom Out on the TaiwanPlus website. Robots are joining Taiwan's firefighting crews, stepping into danger so that their human colleagues don't have to. Chris Gorn reports.
Here lie the charred remains of a firefighting robot sent in to help put out a fire at a chemical plant last month in Jiayi in central Taiwan.
人直接先撤出，并留机器人继续在火场里面做防护的动作。人出来没多久，整个温度提高闪燃，所以就后来全面燃烧之后，屋顶就整个塌陷。
The use of these robots has been on the rise in Taiwan, including at another Jiayi factory fire earlier this month. The bots are able to enter structures and spray water in areas too dangerous for human firefighters to go. They're fitted with a number of cameras and sensors, which send information to their controllers through laptops and tablets.
具有热显像功能的镜头。第二个是可以跟随炮塔转动的角度而跟着转动的镜头。 最下面这边则是机器人本身的镜头，第四个呢则是气体侦测器的镜头。
This all as there have been calls for greater protections for first responders like firefighters. An incident in the city of Hsinchu last year, where 2 firefighters lost their lives in the line of duty, saw greater public attention on the issue and demands for reforms from those in the profession. While the robots have had some success, they still have some limitations as well.
目前这些消防机器人还是以人工遥控为主，还没有办法完全的自主判断火场的环境跟自主行动，它没有办法长时间常驻于现场，因为必须要等到消防人员到了才能开始部署。
There are currently 141 of the robots being used in fire departments across the country. The National Fire Agency says the Jiayi fires show the robot's utility in protecting firefighters and will continue to integrate them into their operations.
我们还会再继续进，因为这些成功的案例已经发生了，我们会继续进大概79台消防机器人，未来也会部件各多在各县市继续执行以机器人替代人命的作业，让它能够发挥功效。
Each robot costs between $50,000 and $200,000 US. While the robots may be expensive, fire departments would argue there's no price too high to ensure their human firefighters make it home. Dolphin Chen and Chris Gorin for TaiwanPlus.
Chinaberry trees can grow to dozens of meters tall and can live for more than 100 years. But due to an unfortunate homonym in their name in Taiwanese Taigi, many of them were cut down here. Rick Lau reports from the country's tallest surviving Chinaberry on the fight for its survival.
A majestic but silent giant towers over this small village in Taiwan's central mountain range. Standing at over 30 meters tall is the country's largest Chinaberry tree. For about 140 years, it's been a fixture of daily life here in Guanghua, dropping its leaves each winter and flowering in purple blooms each spring.
就高开门就带着希望。
其实那个也是有一个代表性的，代表就是我们这边就是这空气好，然后这水质好。
This tree is a rarity. In Taiwanese Taigi, Chinaberry is called Kolian, a name that sounds like the word for sorrow and bitterness. And for that reason, many in Taiwan cut down trees like this. But here in Guanghua, one survived, and as the tree reaches new heights, so do concerns about its health.
先丢这个分叉，丢这个分叉，我们爬。这个。对啊。
Locals have called in the experts. Rebecca Xu is Taiwan's most renowned tree scientist, dedicating decades to finding and protecting Taiwan's tallest trees.
你现在就直接那个挂钩的地方再加1.5米打结啊。
On her first visit to Guanghua, Xu climbed to the top of the tree and was relieved to give Taiwan's tallest Chinaberry a clean bill of health.
如果这棵树它生病了，然后这边的人一定会被影响啊！你也知道，心理会影响身体嘛，对，所以我觉得这个就是有这样 symbol 是很 lucky 的，就不是每个村子都有这样。
Taiwan's ancient trees are under pressure. With rising temperatures and an increasingly erratic typhoon season, trees like this one are more vulnerable than ever. And with 60% of Taiwan's land covered in forest, Xu can't do this alone. She's now enlisting the help of people like Zai Yao, a member of the indigenous Zhou group who grew up just across the valley from Guanghua. He's told the village he'll help care for their tree, and says the traditions of his people who've lived in these mountains for thousands of years guides his work in the forest.
其实州主就是跟环境其实是环境，包括说，我们看到的是周围的东西。 从树、山、河川都是很有联系，因为那就是我们的生活。
多吃哦。As the experts scale its branches, this tree's enduring presence has also become like a bridge, connecting community, science, and age-old traditions. Its future, standing tall as a guardian over this valley, depends not only on its strong roots in this land, but also its strong roots in its people. Luffy Li, Peachy Zhuang and Rick Lowett in Jiayi County for TaiwanPlus.
And thank you for tuning in today for What's Up Taiwan. Finally, check out this boat that sailed from Danshui in northern Taiwan to Kaohsiung in the south with 62 Taiwanese and French students on board. They took 6 days to complete their journey, raising awareness about marine pollution. I'm Eric Yao. Take care. We'll see you next time.